Okay. I don't know why I'm recording this, but I feel like I kind of have to, and I don't know if this will ever get uploaded to anything. More than likely not. It's more than likely something that'll just be from me. You know, there's part of me that feels really silly about this video. And I guess it's... See, I don't want to claim that I was raised with this kind of like country macho mentality or whatever. But there was part of it. You know, that's part of it. It's just, I know that there are people out there that take this type of thing much better than I do, and I wonder why I take it so hard. But I am. My little dog, Boogie, I had to put her to sleep today. And, I loved her very much. I loved her very much. And she was a young dog, you know. She wasn't old. She turned 5 this month. This February of 2010. She turned 5 this month, and she got sick. She had a couple of weeks ago. She had a bout with pancreatitis, which runs in her breed. She was a miniature schnauzer, and I guess they're prone to get pancreatitis as they get a little older. And we took her into the vet, and of course it cost a fucking arm and a leg to get all the tests run to find out what was wrong with her. She just stopped eating. Didn't want to eat food anymore. You know, was barely drinking any water, was really lethargic. So we took her in, and after a couple of visits, they finally, you know, she just got worse and worse and ended up starting to have vomiting and diarrhea. And they finally were able to nail down that it was pancreatitis, and it cost us an arm and a leg. Not that that should even be, you know, I feel sick that that's even a consideration, you know. But it is. And they put her on some antibiotics and an anti-inflammatory, and literally the next day, I mean, we gave her the pill that night, and she went to bed, and the next day she woke up, and I could tell she was feeling better. You know, she was energetic, and we started to feed her a little bit at a time, like a bland diet or whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. She felt better for 5 or 6 days. And then, you know, we gave her the last of the anti-inflammatories that the people prescribed. And 2 days later, she started turning her nose up at food again. And that was about 2 days ago. She ate still, but wasn't eating like she normally would. And then it just went downhill so fast. You know, it went so fast. I mean, yesterday, she was really lethargic. I mean, we called and made an appointment for the vet today to see what was wrong. I made an appointment with the vet to see what was wrong, and I slept on the couch with her last night, and when I woke up this morning, she had gotten so much worse. You know, she was whimpering constantly. I mean, she was in a lot of pain, and she was shaking, and you could just tell she was hurting a lot. So I took her into the vet today. My wife had to work, so I took her. And, you know, if you'd asked me this morning if I thought that I would have been losing my dog today, even with as bad as she looked, because I so had it in my mind that I would have done anything, you know, any amount of money, any amount of time, any amount of fucking medications or procedures, because I love this dog. I've never had a pet like her, and I'll get into her story, I guess, a little bit. I want to say how she died, and then talk about, I guess, a little bit how she lived, and but I took her into the vet, and the vet started to look at her and could tell right away that there was something really wrong with her. And she lifted up her gums, and lifted up her lip to look at her gums, and her gums were yellow. And the vet told me that was indicative of something pretty major. That when a dog gets the yellow gum thing going on, that it's very, very often a really bad thing. And she said that if she had to take a guess, because of the pancreatitis and the pancreas living so close to the liver, that she was starting to have liver failure. And she got markedly worse. Even while I was there at the vet with her, she got worse. She started throwing up on the table and was whining, and she was in a lot of pain, And even then, I wasn't even thinking it. I was thinking, whatever I need to do for the dog, I'm gonna do. If I gotta fucking empty my savings or whatever, to move money over from somewhere to somewhere else, I don't care. That's just my natural reaction. And so I called my wife and I told her what was going on, and she said, well, what do you feel like you should do? And I said, I want to pay. It ended up being like another fucking, I don't even know how much, that doesn't even matter. It was a lot of money that they wanted to put her on an IV drip and keep her hospitalized so they could observe her and run a bunch of fucking tests. And, I was inclined to spend the money. And my wife at first was like, okay, well, if that's what you feel like we ought to do. And so I went ahead and told the doctor, go ahead and do it. And then my wife called me, and she was crying. And I think, thank goodness that I have my wife to make this decision, because I ultimately do think that we made the right decision, even though it feels horrible. It feels so fucking horrible. She said, we can't do this. And she's right. We can't afford to every 3 weeks have the dog doing this. And then, so I pulled the vet back in, and the vet basically, I got the vet. I said, look, I need you to square with me here. I mean, and the vet said, she said, I can't tell you for certain, but she said, my feeling is that it's not good. And I trust the vet, and I trust my instincts, and my instincts were saying the same thing. If you'd seen how she was acting, it was not good. So, we had to put her down. My wife was able to leave work and say goodbye, and we had to put her down. And I didn't want to see it happen, and maybe that's a cowardly thing. I know I've talked to people that really love their animals that sit there with them as they slip away or whatever the fuck. I didn't want to see it happen. I couldn't, neither did my wife. And I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time with the dog beforehand, because she always knew, if we were sad or hurting or whatever. She was a really intuitive little dog. And I didn't want her to be I didn't want her to be scared. So we said our goodbyes, and they took her back, and that's it. That's it. And she didn't deserve to live the rest of her life sick. She was such an energetic little dog. She was so, I read a lot. I ended up having to read a lot about miniature schnauzers to own this dog, because she had pretty much every problem that comes with the breed, And when you read about them, you learn little quirks of the breed that you know are true because you've been dealing with the dog. And one of the things is that miniature schnauzers love people. They love being around people. They love being involved in everything that you do. She used to, when we do laundry, we'd lay on the living room floor and fold laundry and watch TV or whatever, and she had to be right there. She'd want to be sniffing the laundry and sniffing your hands while you were doing it. She was, she just always wanted to be involved. And one of the things that they said about schnauzers is that they love people and they love their families, but they have one person. They end up choosing one person that they're really attached to, and I was her person. And there was no doubt about that. I was her person, and she'd sleep in the bed with us, and greeted me when I came home. My house is gonna be so empty. When we first got Boogie, we had kind of decided that we were going to get a dog, and we looked at different breeds of dog, and we thought, at the time we were living in a condo, so we needed a dog that didn't need a whole gigantic amount of space. And schnauzers, we were going to walk her a lot, and we did, so we thought she'd be good in a condo. And we saw an ad, and it was a breeder, of course. And so we went out to pick out our dog. And I guess I should have known from the very beginning. In fact, I did. We got to this breeder's house, and this woman must have had 12 mini schnauzers. Adults, running around and barking. They're very loud, vocal dogs. I got used to it eventually, but when people would come over to the house, it's just part of their breed. They bark to let you know that they know that you're there, I guess. I don't know. And, it was just barking, and there were 2 little puppies left. One of them was salt and pepper gray. That's the color that most people associate with schnauzers, the gray and white. And one of them was white, and obviously the runt of the litter. And I was instantly drawn to the little gray one. He was energetic, and he was jumping up on the side of the, they were in a little pen or whatever. He was jumping up there, wanted to be with me, so I grabbed him up, and he licked my face, and I was like, oh, this is an easy choice. The reason I wasn't drawn to the little white one was because the first time I ever saw Boogie was the little white one. The first time I ever saw Boogie, she was sitting on the newspaper in this little baby pen that they were in a puddle of her own piss. And there wasn't piss everywhere. It was just like she had peed and then sat down. And we were standing there by the thing, and her little brother was so energetic and happy to see us, and she was just kind of... And my wife was instantly drawn to Boogie, instantly just grabbed the little white one and wanted the little white one. And that was basically our minds were made up at that point. Her mind was made up, and I wasn't I wasn't going to be given any input at that point. She wanted the little, and I even told my wife at that point, I said, are you sure this? I said, seems like there might be something wrong with her. No, she's fine. So we ended up getting her. And we took her home. And like 3 days later, we took her into the vet for her first round of shots. I guess she'd already had her, I don't know. Well, she needed her shots. And we took her into the vet. Everything was routine. Doctor came in, gave her a couple of shots in the ass, gets up, and leaves. And we go to pay. And I'm holding Boogie at this point. I've got her in my arms. And she starts yelping, And nobody really noticed because it was a vet, and there was lots of dogs, in cages in the back, yelping and crying and barking, So nobody notices. Even my wife didn't notice. I think she thought that maybe she was barking at something. But to me, holding her and being right there, I knew it was a yelp. I knew something was wrong. And so she starts yelping, and it's louder, and it's louder, and it's louder. And finally, all of a sudden, just out of the blue, she goes completely limp in my arms. And pisses and shits all over me. Like her bowels and bladder just let go. And she basically died right in my arms. And the nurse saw this happen and grabbed her from me, and runs into the back. And they end up having, all this emergency shit. And like something you see on ER, but for a fucking dog. I mean, I'm watching through the window and they've got a little doggy mask on her. And at one point the dog was pumping on her. I mean, she was like, when we bought her, she was like a 4-pound ball of fuzz, and the doctors in there pumping on her chest. My wife is crying, I'm freaked out. And eventually the doctor comes in and says, we were able to save her. And she looks like she's actually going to be okay. And I said, well, what the fuck? What happened? And he said, like 1 in 300,000 or 400,000 dogs has a severe anaphylactic reaction to the vaccinations, and we lucked out. We won the lottery, And he said usually when it happens, they die. He said that if had we waited 15 seconds to get her to him, like let's say we'd paid and gotten out into the parking lot, he said she would have died. So it was just luck, that she didn't. And from that moment on, I just felt the bond with that dog. I nursed her back to health. She was really weak for a long time. It took her a long time to recover from that, but she was okay. You can tell she was strong. She was just feeling weak. And I slept on the ground with her because she didn't want to be under covers and stuff. So I slept downstairs on the ground with her, next to her. And from that point on, there was a bond. And, I'd never felt like that with an animal before. I'd had animals growing up. I'd had, dogs and cats, and I had a fucking iguana at one point. Guinea pigs. But I'd never, animals were always just animals. They were nice, you loved them, but they're an animal. And this one, she became a part of my family, And my wife and I, we just loved her, and she was loud and obnoxious sometimes, and I think a lot of other people didn't understand how we put up with it, because she would just bark and she'd go crazy sometimes. But she just was. We loved her. There was no question of putting up with it. After a certain amount of time, it just was. And yeah. She lived a good life, It was short. I wish it could have been longer. But she lived a good life. I think she was a lot happier with us than... I firmly believe that 99% of people that get a dog like that she would have died that day, She would have died that first day. And never had the 5 years that she did have, so... And she was a happy dog, She was not a depressed dog, not a neglected dog or an abused dog. She was a spoiled-ass dog, And I'm going to miss her. I'm going to miss her very much.